More Culpable with the launch of Resonate Originals, the latest from our daily newsletter at podnews.net. Podcast producer Resonate Recordings is launching Resonate Originals with a 5-show tenderfoot TV deal. The company has also made a number of hires, and we're promised a new season of the Culpable podcast and a number of new shows. Podsights has released its Q1 22 conversions benchmark report. Mid-roll ads work best, says the study, with the average conversion rate being 1.42%. How much did Amazon pay for My Favorite Murder? Bloomberg suggests that the figure was $100 million, and for that, Amazon got other Exactly Right media shows as well. Bloomberg's story also reports that SiriusXM's deal with AudioChuck was worth 9 figures. SiriusXM has launched Audio ID, a new method of targeting ads to audiences. It's said to be private and optional for listeners. Q is a new premium audio and video podcast production company. It's launched in Manchester in England by the team behind podcast.co. If you link to the Breaker podcast app on your website, you might want to check that they still work. The app was acquired by Maple Media a year ago, and as of today, no Breaker links to podcasts work on the service. And the Breaker website itself just forwards to Player FM. The app's still listed in the app stores, though. It looks just like Player FM, but is blue. Podcast host Podigy has released a roles and permissions system for enterprise podcasters. The Fountain podcast app now has automatic downloads and other new features. The BBC says it saw a total of 257 podcast downloads globally last quarter. That would make it the number 3 podcast publisher in the world. Possibly. NPR has 169 million versus the BBC's 85 million per month. Last week, we quoted Supercast saying they were the only membership service offering Spotify open access support to all its podcasters. Supporting Cast also does so, and we regret the error. And happy Lunar New Year. May the year of the tiger bring you prosperity and good health. Now, it's time for Spotify news. Sorry about that. Joe Rogan released a defensive video statement on Sunday night on his Instagram.
One of the things that Spotify wants to do that I agree with is to put a disclaimer and say that you should speak with your physician and that these people and the opinions that they express are contrary to the opinions of the consensus of experts, which I think is very important. Sure, have that on there. I'm very happy with that. Also, I think if there's anything that I've done that I could do better is have more experts with differing opinions right after I have the controversial ones. I would most certainly be open to doing that.
Joe Rogan, the full video is 9 minutes long. Rogan takes information out of context and gives a skewed and inaccurate view, a forthcoming episode of Science Versus will say. Gimlet's Wendy Zuckerman and Blythe Terrell say they will no longer make the podcast, accepting episodes intended to counter misinformation, they say, being spread on Spotify. Adding that Spotify's support of Rogan feels like a slap in the face. Spotify, of course, owns Gimlet. And a Morgan Stanley client note today lowers Spotify's target price to $300, albeit still a 50% upside from its current price of $196. They say Spotify's revenue growth will come more from advertising than subscription money, and that international growth will help the company in things like the Joe Rogan experience. Morgan Stanley owns 7% of Spotify. Meanwhile, an Arete Research client note sent last week set a target price of $158 and advises clients to sell stock, criticising the company's lack of delivery of marketed shows and features, highlighting its expansion into audiobooks and other distracting areas, and mentioning that its recent expansion into 90 new markets wasn't reflected by any spike in total users. And in People News, Nick Lowther is joining the ABC Audio On Demand department for 10 months. He's normally Chief of Staff at ABC Western Plains in Dubbo in New South Wales in Australia. And Leda Maritz has joined NPR as Programme Manager for the NPR Plus podcast subscription service. She joins from Apple Podcasts, where she was on the editorial team. Now, it's a Tuesday and time for some tech stuff. The Podcast Index's value for value streaming SATS service has achieved a blip. A blip is similar to an RFC, a design document describing the format of payments made over the Lightning Network while listening to a podcast. JustCast is supporting the podcast person tag for podcast credits and data. To kickstart cross-app comments, John Spurlock has released MiniPub, an open-source microservice that significantly eases development time. Helipad is being updated to a new version 0.1.8, which fixes a bug or two and also adds a new endpoint for streams. It'll come in a future update to Umbral. The app lets you monitor Boost messages in real time.
Boostagram Corner.
Thanks for messages sent via the Boost button in new podcast apps. Kyrin from Mere Mortals writes, boosting pod news because I haven't before. Oh, and bring back Boostagram Corner. Listen to the angry mob. It's back, Kyrin. Dave Jones writes, if only the Spotify developers were as productive as the Spotify PR department. Has anyone considered maybe decaf for those guys? Decaf for developers? Crazy talk. Oh, you don't mean them. And Adam Curry points out that he doesn't like the cicadas in the background of this podcast. Well, listen, Adam, we're on a temporary microphone in an empty room. We too are looking forward to being back in the office, and right now I am under a duvet, or doona as they call it, and if I was to get out from under the duvet, then all of a sudden I sound really echoey. You can send us a message if you're running a new podcast app. Just go to newpodcastapps.com to learn more. And thank you for supporting the value that you get from this podcast. Right, duvet back on again. And in podcast news, after decades of scientific study and political wrangling, the world has agreed, at least on paper, that 1.5 degrees Celsius of heating must be the upper limit of our impact on the climate system. Threshold has a new season, Time to 1.5, which asks, how could something that sounds so small matter so much? And that's the latest from our newsletter. For all the links, we're at podnews.net.